Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Paulicki. He's Jacob Liberta, and we're a Minnesota sports podcast. So if you're a Minnesota sports fan, please click the subscribe button on this channel. And if you're a Vikings fan, pound that like button because training camp is right around the corner, And it's obviously exciting when football season's coming back. You know, it's been the long summer of baseball, and I guess the NBA ended not too long ago, but I think we're all ready for some football again. Training camp's always an exciting time. It offers, a lot of hope. Everybody's 0-0. It's a brand new beginning, and even the worst franchises like the Detroit Lions can even have a little bit of hope heading towards the season. So we're going to jump into it and talk about what we're most looking forward to, some of the main storylines potentially going into this training camp. So let's start with you, Liberta. What are you most looking forward to as training camp approaches here?
Boy, yeah, there's all sorts of things. I think every day that goes by, I'm getting a little bit more excited for football season. But I guess the number one thing really is how this team looks under the direction of Kevin O'Connell. As we've talked about for months, we're quote-unquote running it back. And the only real changes here in the organization of leadership, both of the head coach and the general manager. So I'm curious what this looks like, what KOC can get out of Kirk finally, and maybe what else he can do to affect this roster, especially this offense, coming from a Super Bowl champion. I know he didn't call the plays, but he definitely had his fingerprints all over it, working with Sean McVay, orchestrating just this fantastic season for the Rams, especially Matthew Stafford, who people have been known to compare to Kirk. So yeah. I'm curious to see what this looked like, especially in the early stages of training camp here. So maybe you'll get some inkling as far as what he values, as far as maybe even simple things like how many 3 wide receiver sets you see when they're practicing. Like if there's a specific personnel grouping that you feel like that they're leaning heavily on towards practicing in these, especially in these early weeks and, formative times when you're getting everybody really up to par with what he wants to run, what kind of schemes he wants to deploy. So yeah, I think that's probably what I'm most excited for here. How about you, Bailey?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's going to be a completely different sort of vibe with just, we're so used to having Zim around and Spielman, and you get the classic GM talk from Spielman when he meets with the media. Zimmer's, he's always Zim when he interviews. It's just going to be a little different now. I know Kevin O'Connell, gives the most generic cliche answers, and he's kind of boring himself. But at the same time, it's a different kind of attitude. It's lighter. It's more inclusive. I know all the buzzwords, inclusive and collaboration and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's going to make somewhat of a difference, honestly. And I think it's going to be a boring training camp just because I think you'll see a lot of like veteran rest type days. I don't think you'll see guys going too hard in terms of like one-on-one drills or anything like that. I mean, they'll still have the one-on-ones, but I just think, Zimmer wasn't too crazy about it either. Like there was a lot of rest days for veterans and stuff like that. But I think O'Connell is going to take it to a whole nother level. And I think even when it comes to preseason games, it'll be interesting to see, if any of these main starters even really play. I mean, it'd be nice to get some first team reps for the offense, considering it's going to be a new offensive scheme, and same with the defense. I mean, they're completely switching schemes. So it'll be interesting to see how much they play those guys. I'm not going to be banking on a lot, which is okay. I don't want anyone getting hurt in the preseason. And speaking of being hurt in the preseason, I'm also excited to see Irv Smith come back. He's, basically a full year now recovered from his injury he suffered last preseason, and just seeing how he looks. And, if he's going to be ready to roll and finally emerge as that legit tight end receiving option that can really, make a difference, because we obviously have amazing skill position players all around the field. But then you factor in a game-breaking tight end. Conklin did a nice job last year, but he doesn't quite have the athleticism that Irv Smith does. So I'm really excited to see how Irv Smith looks coming off his injury. And then, just some of the new pieces in general. Zadarius Smith, it'll be cool to see him in a Vikings uniform. I'm pretty excited about Harrison Phillips. And obviously some of the draft picks too, like Lewis Seen, I think is going to be a stud. Hopefully Andrew Booth can compete for some good playing time right off the bat. And, maybe Ed Ingram pushes for a job on the offensive line. So with that, speaking about the offensive line, let's get into some position battles. Which one are you most looking forward to, Liberta, and how do you think it's going to shake out?
I think as far as the most important to our team's success and how we need it to fall is probably going to be that right guard spot. I don't know if it's getting talked about enough. Probably depends who you talk to, but truth be told, obviously everybody on the offense, when you point at potential problems, I think Bradbury's number one. But it feels like they're feeling good about rolling into the season with him, although they didn't pick up his option, but still. And that kind of leaves the one question mark of a starter at right guard. I feel like all the other positions are pretty well ironed out. So then you kind of come down to, is Ed Ingram going to start right off the bat at right guard as a rookie? Or are you going to get Jesse Davis or Chris Reed, the Wiley veterans that they signed for pretty cheap and brought in here to compete? Now, if I got my way, Jesse Davis won't see the field. Based off of last season, that just scares me so much.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, he's versatile. He can play guard. He can play tackle. But it's like you look at his career, his PFF grades, respectively, they're just terrible no matter where he is. And it goes beyond last season, too, when he was bottom 5 in the entire league when it came to PFF grades as far as offensive linemen go. It's like, I don't want any part of that. This just feels like Dakota Dozier 2.0. So, like, get that out of my face. But I'm kind of feeling some Chris Reed. I think that's a little bit more league average. I think I can roll in the season with that. And then ideally, Ed Ingram kind of comes along and maybe he becomes a starter eventually this season, just kind of like Darrisaw did last year. That's probably how I'd like to see it happen, but I guess you never really know. Depends how much Ingram's ready for the NFL game. Right. So I guess, that's probably, plain and simple, the number one camp battle I'm looking at here, because I'm kind of scared how that one's going to shake out, because that's just one of those holes that all the Kirk stands out there will point to if it doesn't get fixed and Kirk has a bad season. It's like, oh, well, we put in Jesse Davis at right guard. It's like, no, I don't want that. I want these excuses to be eliminated, not just like continuing with the status quo, I guess. So
right.
I'm really hoping that Chris Reed just looks like the average offensive lineman he did last year for the Colts and wins that job, and then we're fine. Then it's just an afterthought. So I think that's probably the first one I'd look at, or most important one I'd look at. I don't know. How you feeling, Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, offensive line for sure, and it's offensive line every single year. And I agree with you. I think Chris Reed would be just a solid, steady presence, kind of anchoring the right side of Garrett Bradbury there, because, I mean, Bradbury needs all the help he can get. Ezra Cleveland, hopefully, will take another step this year at left guard. I mean, he's done pretty well his first couple seasons. Then, obviously, O'Neill's a stud, and Darrisaw looks like he's going to be a stud. So as long as he can stay healthy, I think that'll be really good. So another battle I'm kind of looking forward to. There's a couple. Cornerbacks, I think, is going to be really interesting. I mean, Patrick Peterson's probably going to get the starting job, I would imagine, right out of camp, barring injury. But I'm kind of curious to see how the battle turns out between Dantzler and Andrew Booth, if Booth can get on the practice field here after recovering from offseason surgery. And maybe he can push for a starting spot. I would be amazed if Cam Dantzler is not starting week 1 and Booth actually overtakes him. Because I think Dantzler's a starting quality corner. You like to compare him to Trey Waynes. And I think that's a fairly accurate comp. I think he's a cornerback number 2. I don't think he's ever going to be a shutdown corner. I mean, he's got the height, but he doesn't really have the bulk and the intensity, I guess, to be like a shutdown corner. He seems a little passive. So maybe Andrew Booth has that swag and that, that determination to be the number 1 shutdown corner, and he can overtake Patrick Peterson eventually. We'll have Shandon Sullivan back there as well as our slot corner. And there's a couple other guys that'll be back there too. I'll be interested to see how Cam Bynum kind of mixes in now that we have 3 safeties that all can really play. But wide receiver as well. I mean, there's so many intriguing options. Obviously, you got Jefferson, Thielen, and Osborne at the top. BC Johnson is back this year. A lot of people think he'll come back as wide receiver 4, but he's going to get a push from guys like Amir Smith-Marset, Jalen Naylor, and then we have Albert Wilson on the squad as well as basically a special teamer. He returns punts and kicks and all that stuff. But, I mean, I think that'll be an interesting battle. Jalen Naylor apparently looked really good at OTAs. I'll be curious to see if he can kind of come out and maybe he'll win the Mr. Mankato this year and be the most impressive player at training camp. But I'm also pulling for a guy like Amir Smith-Marset. I mean, it'd be nice to see BC Johnson come back and play well, but, I mean, it's been a little while since we've really seen him contribute to this team. And there's other intriguing, more athletic, more quick wide receivers behind him here. So I expect him to get pushed for a roster spot. And, I feel like he'll end up making it, but I'll be interested to see how that one turns out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I feel like wide receiver is always a position to watch with the Vikings or really any team. I think when you round out a roster, you always look for these special projects of receivers that could turn into something someday. We had the Diggses of the world and the Thielens and stuff. Like, we've been very fortunate as far as that goes, as far as developing wide receivers. So, like, to ideally think that one of these guys that you keep on the roster now, like kind of you stash basically until the future, that he could contribute in a big way someday. So I think that's kind of how I look at it as far as the lens I look through it. And I think, yeah, especially Naylor, that feels like one that maybe could be on the cusp of something. I know
Hmm.
that McCardell, he's pretty excited about that draft pick. So I'm pretty excited to see what he's got. I think, especially here in camp one. And I guess speaking to that with the rookies, I guess going back to,
Hmm.
you're talking about the secondary, I was kind of looking and thinking about the safeties and thinking about how could Lewis Seen like flash enough in camp where he just gets the outright starting job right away, like this coming season, week one, like, or is Bynum just going to be the veteran, well, so to speak, veteran, because obviously he's coming into year two, so like
Hmm.
that's quote unquote. But I would think Bynum, you feel like he's got the job, but I guess it's Seen. Who knows? I mean, that's the first draft pick that Kwesi and KOC made together, so maybe they value him pretty highly and right off the bat. So I'd be curious to see how that'll work, and like we think too. I know that there will be some 3 safety sets where you see all 3 of them on the field at once. So maybe you get a lot of that, even if one of them's not technically starting, that you still see a lot of them. So
Right.
but still intriguing nonetheless. So I kind of want to see how much Lewis Seen can flash and really push by him, I guess, for that second safety spot.
Yeah, and I think our buddy Krenzi brought this up as well. Lewis Seen, I think, is going to get moved around the field all over the place. He could potentially play some sort of linebacker spot because linebackers are starting to get smaller in the NFL now. And we drafted Brian Asamoah in the 3rd round. Apparently, he's been a really intriguing rookie this offseason. I mean, if you can get some smaller linebackers in there next to Eric Kendricks, who I still think is a very good player at his position, I think you add more speed, you add more coverage ability. I mean, I think you'll match up better with some of these difficult matchups. I mean, the Vikings have been horrific against tight ends for the longest time, and even slot receivers that are just coming across the middle. It seems like we can never. It seems like they're always running wide open. Nobody ever picks them up. So, I think having more rangy linebackers and like you mentioned, the 3 safety set where one of the safeties is going to end up basically playing de facto linebacker or maybe even a corner spot. So it'll be interesting all the different variations they have with this defense. But I think that's what's going to be so exciting is everything is going to be so much. I mean, the players are basically the same minus the draft picks, but everything is going to be much different schematically.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think diving into the defense a little bit more, even I'm a little bit scared about this linebacker room. Like you said, we have Kendricks, who's obviously a
Yeah,
good player, but then beyond that, man, I feel like there's a whole bunch of question marks. I know, like you
Jordan
said,
Hicks.
Asamoah. Hey, yeah, Jordan Hicks, I think that's a tackling machine. I think he'll be fine assuming he stays healthy. And like you mentioned, Asamoah Flash and these other team activities we've had this offseason. But beyond that, I just don't love the Surratts and the or Surratt, how you pronounce it, or the
Hmm.
Troy Dyes or Ryan
Yeah,
Connolly's or whoever we got back there. Truthfully, right
Blake
now, it's
Lynch.
just yeah, exactly. Like that doesn't really give you great feelings. But ideally, you don't play that many linebackers on the field all at the same time anyway, and hopefully the
Right.
ones that you start don't get hurt, and then it's just kind of a non-issue. And as long as the depth guys can play a little bit of special teams, it's really all you need. But still, it's just like on paper, it just doesn't look great. And I think that's probably the weakest point in my opinion on this roster as far as position
Yeah.
groups go. I don't think it's even close really. So I think that scares me a little bit. So hopefully some other guys can emerge. Like you said, maybe Asamoah continues to build, and like you said, Hicks and Kendricks most importantly staying healthy, and then anybody else if they can give us anything like that's just an added bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quickly before we wrap up, how heartbroken are you that Kyle Rudolph went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Oh, I'm just devastated. Can't believe he didn't come back to Minnesota. But truthfully, when I saw that you sent that text, I laughed because I'm like Tampa with Tom, with Rudy,
He's
really.
Gronk's replacement, baby.
Yeah, one and the same, you know. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's too bad. No, Rudy. I'm glad that temptation is gone. So
yeah.
good for him for going to Tampa and going to be probably in a deep playoff run. So yeah, good for Rudy trying to win a ring at the end of his career.
The last thing I'd want to see this regime do is bring back guys that have left for a little while and then come. Like I really don't like when we do that.
Yeah,
Like I don't want to see Everson Griffin back at this point. Anthony Barr, like he was a good player for us, but I think there's a reason he hasn't been signed yet. I think there's a serious concern about his, lingering knee issues. Um, I don't want to see any of these. Rudolph was another one. I don't want to. It's a new regime. I know you're basically running it back with the players, but that doesn't mean you need to bring back guys that you lost previously. So
yeah.
that's the last thing I'd want to see them do.
Yeah, and adding on real quick, I'm surprised I didn't really think of this right away. I guess I was kind of looking at other positions on the rosters. I'm more like starter focused on what that looks
Yeah,
like when we get to the regular season. But you kind of think about more of the backups, I guess, and kind of think about Kellen Mond, what that might look
true.
like. I think between him and Mannion in camp, I know these are the same 3 guys we rolled into the season with last year, and I know everybody knows Mannion's got the close relationship with Kirk, and basically being a veteran quarterback in his ear on game days or in
Yeah.
the meeting rooms during the week. But then like Mond, is there something there or not? I kind of looking forward to that in year 2 here in the preseason. I know it was a rough goal last year, but it's like how much of a chance he really get. So
Yeah.
I kind of want to see if KOC can get something out of there or get something out of him that nobody is really expecting.
What was wild last year is Jake Browning got like the majority of QB2 reps.
True.
And then didn't
That's
we
right.
end up cutting him or trading him or something? Like, I don't think he made the roster.
Oh, yeah, we ended up cutting him because he literally was terrible in the preseason. Like every drive or snap he got, like nothing good happened. So like we couldn't possibly roll in the season with him as a backup. But I think that was the plan going into training camp. So it was his job to lose, and he lost it. So that was highly unfortunate for him. But it's like we couldn't continue like that. So I'm curious what if we're going to get that kind of Mond this preseason, or if we're going to get some guy that kind of rises to the moment and proves that he can be legit QB2 on this team.
That'll be the nice thing is I think you'll get a lot of Kellen Mond in the preseason because
you'll know.
Kirk will play a possession or two a game, and then
the Rams are very conservative with the way they play their starters. So
exactly, and Mannion, I mean, you don't need to see anything out of Sean Mannion. I mean, you don't need to see him run the offense. So
you know what he is.
I think you'll see a lot of Kellen Mond, and they cut Nate Stanley, so I'm curious, like if they're going to bring in another camp arm of some sort to get through these preseason games. But maybe Mond plays the majority of them, which would be fantastic, I think, for his development.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we take off, Alberta?
That QB position, I think that's the one. I mean, it's the most talked about position in football or in sports, really. So I think had to touch on that here at the end, and I think that's probably one of the things. I mean, easily the thing everybody's watching in preseason, I'd imagine, because that's obviously what jumps out the page first is quarterback play. All the offense does usually revolves around the quarterback. So we'll see how Mon looks, and you're going to get a good look at him, and you'll know if, or KOC at least will know if he can get anything more out of him than maybe being a cut. Who knows? But
yeah, absolutely. It's going to be exciting. It's always exciting when training camp comes back around. And before you know it, it's going to be the NFL regular season, and we're going to be back doing these post-game podcasts talking about what went wrong and ripping Kirk again and all the fun stuff. So make sure to tune in for that. But that will do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I mentioned earlier, please click the like button on this video and hit the subscribe button on this channel, especially if you're a Minnesota sports fan. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram. And let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are you looking forward to the most in training camp this year? What position battles are sticking out to you? And if there's any players in particular that you're excited about, let us know below. And until next time, thanks for watching.